It's April, 1945. You wake up inside Berlin, the capital of Nazi Germany. The Red Army is less than 10 kilometers away. More than 2 million Soviet soldiers are closing in from the east. The war is already lost. Berlin just hasn't accepted it yet. This city has been bombed for years. Its factories are gone. Its railways are broken. Its air defenses are exhausted. And still, Berlin is ordered to hold. Not because it can win, but because surrender is no longer allowed. Outside the city, Soviet artillery has been positioned in layers. Heavy guns, rocket batteries, tank divisions. This isn't a battle for territory anymore. It's a final encirclement. Berlin will be taken, street by street, building by building. Inside the city, movement is restricted. Bridges are guarded. Trains no longer run. You are not a soldier. You are not a leader. You are a civilian, still here when leaving is no longer possible. By the time the first Soviet shells land on the eastern districts, Berlin is already cut off. From this moment on, survival will depend on where you are standing when the city begins to collapse. Berlin is no longer the city it was meant to be. By April 1945, nearly half of its buildings are damaged or destroyed. Entire neighborhoods are missing roofs, walls, or streets altogether. Yet more than 2 million civilians are still here, not because they want to be, but because leaving requires permission that is no longer given. Food arrives sporadically. Electricity works in some districts, fails in others. Water is carried by hand when pipes stop working. Air raid sirens still sound, but most people no longer react to them. Not because they are calm, but because they are exhausted. Officially, Berlin is still defended by the German army. In reality, many experienced units are already gone. What remains are fragments, reserve formations, poorly trained militia, and boys pulled from classrooms into uniforms. The city is told it will be defended to the last street. No one explains how. Trains no longer leave Berlin. Bridges are controlled. Roads are clogged with debris and checkpoints. You can hear artillery in the distance now, not every hour, but often enough to mark time. This is no longer a place you pass through. It's a place you are trapped inside. Everyone knows the Red Army is coming. What no one knows is how long the city will last once the fighting reaches the streets. Because Berlin has never been attacked like this before, and no city survives a battle that has already been decided. On April 16, 1945, the final offensive begins. Soviet forces attack across the Oder River. More than 2 million soldiers, supported by 6,000 tanks and 40,000 artillery pieces, move west. Within days, Berlin is surrounded from 3 sides. This is not an invasion. It is an enclosure. Encirclement doesn't start with fighting in the streets. It starts with isolation. Rail lines are cut first. Telephone exchanges fail next. Military couriers replace communication until they stop arriving too. By the end of the first day, supply schedules are meaningless. Bread rations are reduced without explanation. Hospitals begin preparing for casualties they cannot treat. You notice the city shrinking. Not physically, but in how far you can safely move. Artillery doesn't sound like bombs anymore. It sounds like distance collapsing. The explosions are still outside the city, but closer than yesterday, and closer than anyone admits. Official announcements still speak of defense, but the reality is visible. Defensive positions are manned by mixed units, remnants of the German army, the Volkssturm militia, and teenagers given rifles older than they are. Training is minimal. Ammunition is rationed. Orders are vague. Streets that were safe yesterday are avoided today. Bridges become choke points. Open squares are crossed quickly, if at all. You learn the city again, not by addresses, but by which routes still feel possible. On the first day, no Soviet soldiers enter your street, but Berlin has already become a battlefield. The front line is no longer at the edge of the city. It is wherever you are standing when the next shell lands. On April 21st, 1945, the fighting reaches Berlin itself. Soviet forces break through the eastern suburbs. Districts like Marzahn and Lichtenberg fall first. This is no longer artillery in the distance. The war has entered the city. Fighting in a city is different. Tanks can't see far. Streets turn into corridors. Buildings become firing positions. Every block must be taken separately. Every intersection becomes a problem. From this point on, danger is no longer directional. It doesn't come from the front. It comes from windows, stairwells, basements, from places that were part of daily life a week ago. Soviet units advance in combined groups. Infantry moves first. Tanks follow only after streets are secured. Artillery is brought forward block by block. This is systematic, slow, and overwhelming. German defenders are scattered. Many positions last minutes, not hours. Communication between units breaks down quickly. Orders arrive late, or not at all. You hear fighting, but no one can tell you where the line is anymore. Apartments become shelters. Cellars fill with people who have never met. Streets empty between bursts of movement. You learn to wait, not for safety, but for quieter moments. In some districts, Soviet forces advance hundreds of meters per day. That may sound slow. In a city, it is devastating. Every meter means another building cleared, another group trapped behind the line. Artillery no longer echoes. It cracks. Explosions feel closer because they are closer. Walls vibrate. Dust falls from ceilings. The city no longer absorbs the noise. It reflects it. There is no single front now. The battle runs through stairwells, courtyards, and corridors. You stop asking where the fighting is. The only question left is how close it is to you. By the end of the third day, Berlin is no longer a city under attack. It is a maze of battles, each one shrinking the space where civilians can still exist. By the fourth day, Berlin no longer functions as a coordinated defense. German command structures fracture. Units fight without knowing who controls neighboring streets. Orders contradict each other or never arrive at all. Urban warfare breaks communication faster than open battle. Telephone lines are destroyed. Radio signals are jammed or lost inside buildings. Messages are carried by runners, and many never make it back. Civil administration disappears quietly. Police stations empty. Fire brigades stop responding. Not because people abandon their posts, but because there is nowhere left to go safely. There are no instructions now. No announcements. No one telling you where to go. You make decisions without guidance. Which streets to cross. When to move. When to stay hidden. Supply depots are destroyed or unreachable. Food distribution collapses entirely. Water pressure drops as pumping stations lose power. Some districts still have taps. Others carry water by hand. Curfews stop being enforced. Official identification no longer protects you. The city does not descend into chaos. It becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is worse. Civilians form small, informal groups. Cellars are shared. Information spreads by whispers, not radios. You learn who is still alive nearby, not by announcements, but by footsteps. Fighting descends floor by floor. Upper levels are abandoned first. Basements become living space. The vertical space of the city collapses, pushing everyone underground. By now, the outcome is no longer in doubt. The question is no longer if Berlin will fall, but how long it will take, and how many will still be inside when it does. The city still exists on maps, but in reality, Berlin has already stopped functioning. What remains is a shrinking space where survival replaces order. By the final days of April, Berlin is no longer one battle. It is dozens of disconnected fights happening at once. Soviet units reach the city center. German defenders retreat into smaller and smaller pockets. There is no unified defense left, only isolated resistance. Political power survives only underground. Deep beneath the city, in reinforced bunkers, the remaining leadership issues orders that no longer shape events. Messages sent from below ground take hours to arrive, if they arrive at all. The final fighting is not about territory anymore, it is about symbols. Government buildings, bridges over the Spree, the heart of the city itself. These places matter because they mark the end. You see armed men moving without direction. Some advance, others retreat. Many simply disappear into buildings and never re-emerge. The noise of fighting becomes intermittent, bursts of intensity, followed by long silence. On April 30th, 1945, the decision is sealed. The remaining German leadership accepts what the city already knows. Berlin cannot be held. Orders to continue resistance lose meaning because there are no units left to receive them. In different districts, the fighting ends at different times. White cloth appears in windows. Weapons are set aside in doorways. There is no single moment of silence, only a gradual absence of sound. Capitulation does not feel like relief. It feels like uncertainty. You don't know who controls your street. You don't know what rules apply now. The war has ended, but life has not resumed. By the end of the battle, tens of thousands of civilians are dead or wounded. Entire districts are uninhabitable. Infrastructure that took decades to build has been erased in weeks. Smoke lingers. Streets remain blocked. People emerge cautiously from basements and shelters. The city still stands, but it no longer functions as a capital, or even as a normal place to live. The battle for Berlin is over, but the consequences are just beginning. When the fighting stops, Berlin does not return to normal. It becomes a city under occupation. Soviet forces control the eastern districts. Allied forces approach from the west. The city is intact enough to stand, but too damaged to function. Nazi Germany collapses completely within days. its central government ceases to exist. Authority shifts from a single regime to multiple occupying powers, with competing priorities. Berlin's fall is not just military. It marks the definitive end of Nazi rule in Europe. But it also exposes a new fault line. The alliance that defeated Germany does not share a future. In the months that follow, Berlin is formally divided into zones. Soviet control in the east, American, British, and French control in the west. What was once a single capital becomes a shared space, without shared trust. For civilians, survival continues, but under new rules. Curfews are enforced, travel is restricted, food remains scarce. You learn quickly that peace does not mean freedom. Berlin becomes the front line of a new conflict, not fought with artillery, but with ideology. The city will soon stand at the center of the Cold War. Everything that follows, the Berlin airlift, the wall, decades of division, traces back to these final days in 1945, when one war ended and another quietly began. You survive the battle, but the city you wake up in afterward is no longer the one you knew. Berlin still stands, not as a capital, not as a symbol of power, but as a reminder of how completely a world can change. The fall of Berlin did not just end a war. It reshaped the century that followed, and it all began when the city could no longer hold.